Thank you everyone for joining us from all over the world. We know for some folks it is your mornings, as it is ours in San Francisco. For other people, it is a different type of morning, like 3 or 4 in the morning. So thank you for taking time out of your days to spend an hour with us learning about the Early Childhood Book Challenge. Today we'll be going over some introductions. We'll share a little bit about the challenge. We'll learn from 2 amazing experts that are joining us. Then we'll dive into some Q&A and talk next steps looking ahead for the challenge. So let's do some intros, and I'm happy to kick it off. So I'm Lauren Ito. I'm the community manager for this challenge. Anything that's community facing or community engagement wise, that is my sphere of expertise. So super excited to have interacted with many of you and to continue to get to know you throughout the challenge. Now I'll pass it off to Matt, followed by Hillary.
Hey everyone, lovely to see 104 participants. That's really exciting to have you all on. I'm Matt Ridenauer here on the Open IDEO team in San Francisco, and I'm the program manager for this Early Childhood Book Challenge program. So excited to share a little more and connect with all of you.
Hi everyone, my name is Hillary. I'm one of the outreach specialists with Open IDEO, and if you've been emailing ecbook@ideo.com, I'm probably who you've been corresponding with. So, it's been a very enjoyable journey supporting you guys through this, and I look forward to the upcoming week.
Great, and now I'll hand it over to Itika, and then, hand it over to Itika.
Hi guys, my name's Itika. I am a community fellow with Open IDEO. I'm the person that you see and hear from on the platform. So I know a lot of you who've signed in. Thank you all for coming over. I look forward to all our interactions after the webinar on the platform, most importantly. Thank you.
Awesome. And Jen from William Penn, do you want to give a quick hi as well?
Jen, you might be muted potentially.
Up here,
we'll unmute you. Yep. Yep. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know muted how to tell you that I couldn't.
We got you.
Hi, I'm Jen Stavrakis. I'm a program officer with the William Penn Foundation, and we are supporting this challenge.
Great.
Great.
And next, we will take a moment to introduce our amazing experts that are joining us today. So we're joined by Lisa. If you want to give a quick hi, Lisa. Oh, Lisa, I think you might be muted.
Maybe you're muted.
Okay, we'll hear from Lisa in just a moment.
Yeah.
And we will also be joined shortly by Dr. Patricia A. Edwards, who's a professor and an author, currently a professor at Michigan State University. And we'll dive on in. So next we'll share out a little bit more about the challenge. You're more than familiar right now with our How Might We? Our question that we've posed to the challenge community is, how might we inspire children and their caregivers to read together? And more specifically, our challenge mission is?
Yeah, we're seeking manuscripts for a children's book that engages children from 0 to 3 and provides adults with ways to support early language development. And really what that means is we are looking for something that is a beautiful narrative, that's a story that young children are really engaged with and want to read over and over, and also that through the narrative teaches parents and caregivers how to interact in new ways, how to engage through reading, so that children and parents both just love doing it as much as possible. And so what we're looking for, I started to hit on this, but a manuscript that excites caregivers and educates them about opportunities and importance of reading. And we have a number of resources that we'll share more about, but really there's a number of tools and tips that you can use around not just reading, but singing and rhyming and talking as you're reading. And those are proven ways to support early language development. And we'll be hearing a little bit from Lisa about that in a minute. I should also mention, and we'll talk about this, but the manuscripts, when we talk about educating caregivers, the book that we're hoping to find will not be just a how-to guide of rules that you have to follow as a caregiver, but we hope that the book actually just naturally evokes and incentivizes caregivers to interact more through these language tools, but not that it tells people that they have to do it, if that makes sense. We also want to find a manuscript that engages young children and that they just love, that is a favorite book, and that reflects the lived experience of families living in urban US cities like Philadelphia. We have a number of other target cities from Atlanta to Baltimore to Washington, DC that are kind of in a similar style, but really this is a little bit rooted in Philadelphia, with the William Penn Foundation being there, and us at the end of this distributing 25,000 of the books around Philadelphia. So yeah, we're pretty excited.
To give you a sense of the challenge timeline, so we are currently in the open submission phase right now, and there's just about 2 weeks left. Final submissions, or open submission deadline, is April 12th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, after which our team will go through a period of review, and we will select up to 10 authors to move into the refinement phase, where they'll receive additional support, also be paired with an illustrator to help build out some concept art to bring their story to life. And then our final submissions for that select up to 10 cohort is May 24th, and we will be announcing a winner in late June. And we'll be announcing the final winner manuscript then. Next, we'd love for you to have a chance to meet our partner, who you heard from briefly at the beginning of our call this morning. So I'll turn it over to Jen to talk a little bit more about the William Penn Foundation. Jen, I think you may be muted.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, perfect.
So hi again, I'm Jen Stavrakis from the William Penn Foundation. The William Penn Foundation is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we award about $35 million each year to support education in the city. Our funding is primarily focused on children 0 to 8, and really looking at how we ensure that kids here in Philadelphia are kindergarten ready and they're reading on time by the end of 3rd grade. One of my roles at the foundation is to seek out opportunities for how we best support families and caregivers in their role as their child's first teacher. So it's this work that led us to collaborate with Open IDEO on this challenge for storytellers. You might think, why a children's book? For any of you who've set foot in a bookstore lately, you know that there's certainly no shortage of children's books out in the marketplace. But we think this challenge is calling for something unique. So a story that engages children ages 0 to 3, but also speaks to the caregivers who are reading to them. And we know from our work here in Philadelphia that many caregivers, and by caregivers we mean parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, could be older siblings, they want more information about how they can best support children's learning and development. So you can think of this book as a mechanism for showing them tips and techniques while it's supporting showing them tips and techniques to support early language and literacy, while it's also an entertaining and engaging book for the child. And we say that we would love nothing more than for this to be the book that kids want to read over and over and over again. So what is it that caregivers with newborn babies should know about how to support language development? I think for many caregivers, when they hear early language or literacy, it still is narrowly defined as sitting down with the child in your lap before bedtime and reading a book. And for lots of parents and families, that hallmark moment doesn't necessarily manifest itself, or manifest itself particularly at bedtime when people are tired and stressed and there may be a lot of things going on. And so while reading is certainly a critical part of language development for kids, you know, there's also talking and singing and pointing out things to your child as you travel on the bus or the subway or in the grocery store. And even story times that go off the rails. And for any of you who's tried to read a book to an active toddler, you know that that can often be a challenging situation. But even that process still has an enormous impact on their growing brain, even when it seems like they're too young to understand what's being said. Even responding to a baby's babbling, so mimicking back to them what they say, researchers call this a serve and return, is an important brain building interaction for kids. And it's also important for caregivers to understand, especially in a diverse city like Philadelphia, that speaking to their baby in any language is beneficial. And it doesn't have to be the same language that the child will eventually be expected to speak when they enter kindergarten. So again, what we're asking with this challenge is, how can a story that's written for a child also show an adult some simple ways to support early literacy? And we're looking for all of you writers and illustrators that have joined us today to show us your great ideas of how this can be done. And it's been so much fun to see what so many of you have already created on the platform.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. And
Thanks,
for providing
Jen.
us with a lot of context, not only from the William Penn Foundation's perspective, but also just insights that are helpful as folks think about sculpting their narratives in the early childhood space more broadly. Thanks.
Okay.
And next, we're going to learn from some incredible experts. And first, we'll be chatting with Lisa Dwyer. Lisa serves as GEEARS Director of Special Projects and Partnerships, and he manages the Mayor Summer Reading Club program, which we'll speak a little bit to in her talk with us today. Additionally, she's also on the board of the Atlanta Speech School, is the president of the North Atlanta High School Foundation for Atlanta Public Schools, and has spent many years supporting early childhood and public education more broadly through Georgia and beyond. So we're very excited to learn from Lisa. Welcome, Lisa, and I'll hand it off to you.
Lisa. Lisa's also an advisor for our early childhood book challenge, so we're excited to have her here. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks. Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Can we move to the next slide?
Yes.
So a little bit about GEEARS. GEEARS is the Georgia Early Education Alliance for Ready Students. We are focused on 0 to 5, birth to 5 kids in Georgia, and making sure that they are ready to be in school when they get to school at either 5. So that's most of what we do is focused around that. We do that through a couple of different ways. We focus on a lot of communications work. Our communications goes out to various audiences. So we focus on legislators, but we also focus on general public. We talk to caregivers and providers. And we work really closely with, in Georgia, we have a Department of Early Care and Learning, which is only focused on early childhood providers. So it's separate, it's not part of the Department of Education. So it's a separate piece just focused on birth to 5. We advocate for effective policies that support access to high quality early education, but also learning and development experiences and health policy related to those, because if kids aren't healthy, they're not going to be coming to school. They're not going to be coming ready to be in school. We focus on research and innovation also. So if you go to our website, you can find maps for the entire state of Georgia and all the counties that show things like how many child care facilities are in a given area. Out of how many of those facilities, how many are quality rated, which is a system in Georgia that we use to help parents understand the quality levels at different centers. So that's our focus mostly. The reason I'm here is that we have a program called Mayor Summer Reading Club that we started in the city of Atlanta, which is where we're based, and have rolled out to a couple of other cities in Georgia on a very small level. But in Atlanta, we're giving about 20,000 books a summer out. And we have, the first 5 years of the program, we developed one of the books for the 3 to 5 year olds that is similar to what you all are being challenged to come up with. I think maybe next slide, Lauren. Thank you. The goals for us when we're looking for books for our Mayor Summer Reading Club are on this slide. We really talk about making the reading experience an interactive experience for kids and caregivers. So like Jennifer was saying, instead of just having a child sitting on your lap reading a book, it doesn't have to be that. It can be almost anywhere where you're talking about a book that you've maybe read. So you're pushing in and pulling out vocabulary, and it's that serve and return again that Jennifer spoke about. So as you're going through the book, you are, as the adult, you are being able to pull out words and phrases and things that are happening in the book to the child, no matter how young the child is. So I know that sounds, it sounds like it doesn't make a lot of sense when you're talking about like a baby who's under a year or two old, but that interaction is really important to the child and to the story, to them really understanding and developing their language. It's all about the number of words that they're hearing before they get to kindergarten. So you want to be giving them some of those interactions that are teaching them more and more words. And I'm not a slide reader, so you all can read slides. So I'm going through, so we'll talk about teaching the key concepts about causing children to think critically, about the story problem. Even if you're looking at a very simple picture book for, the 0 to 2-year-old space or 3-year-old space, there are things you can talk about. If it's so simple as, a picture with dog and cat, there are things that you can talk about around that, like, oh, do we have a cat? Do you have a cat? Have you seen a cat? Are cats furry? Things like that to engage the children even more, and just get some thinking going on as far as connecting dots for kids. We talk a lot about when we're developing our books, we're talking about using tier 1 and tier 2 language. And I think we have another slide that will go into that more, our next slide. And then also having some big ideas. So again, even though you're looking at the birth to 3 space, still having some takeaway pieces. The babies know more than you think they know, or they can absorb more than you think they can. And so that's one of the things we see a lot of times, even in our book club, so we have our book club, our Mayor Summer Reading Club, is for 0 to 5-year-olds. So we usually have 2 books. One is for the 0 to 2 to 3-year-olds, and one's for 3 to 5-year-olds. And it's amazing to us how many parents grab the book for their 3 to 5-year-old that's really meant for the 0 to 2-year-olds, because they think that's what their child's ability is. And it's always can be pushed higher. So it's not trying to like challenge the kids necessarily. It's trying to develop a better, richer language experience than what they're getting, in the 0 to 3 as you move into the 3 to 5-year-old age group. And that goes into this engaging in meaningful conversations. So one of the things that we've focused on is we only do, 1 book per age group for the summer. And the idea is that the kids will have the book and come to various activities around the same book. So like Matthew talked about earlier, really getting kids to engage with the book in different ways. So if it's, if it's a library read, they might just do a regular read at the library, but then the next day they can, do something at home where you're saying, oh, in this book, I'm using a dog as an example, as an easy example, but the next day at home, you can talk about like, oh, look, remember in the book we read yesterday, the dog was eating his food. See, our dog is eating his food. Things like that to connect the story to the child and to real life. Next slide, Lauren. Thank you. We employ this read strategy, and I think it's good for you to know as somebody who's developing a book, that this is what we're telling parents. This is a pretty commonly used strategy in in various forms. The Rollins Center for Language and Literacy at the Atlanta Speech School has come up with this read. But again, it takes many forms in different academic areas. So we talk about repeating the book. So reading the book more than once. And these are kind of the strategies that we're telling parents and the caregivers when they are interacting with our books for the summer. Engage and enjoy the book with your child. So again, that is talking about the book and what's going on in the book, being able to, and in order to do that, you need more than just a picture of a dog with the word dog under it, right? So you need some better storylines than just basic picture books like this is a square, this is a circle, right? Ask children questions about what's happening in the book is the A, and then do more with the book. So do an activity that's discussed in the book or talk about the book in other various ways and in other situations that you're in. And then this cover, I think Lauren's putting out, or somebody's putting out some of these resources. These Amari is the book that we've developed in conjunction with the speech school. The Amari series. So for the first 5 years of the Atlanta Mayor's Summer Reading Club, the Atlanta Speech School Rollins Center wrote the book Amari, and Amari was kind of the star as a child who had various adventures throughout the city of Atlanta. So in the book, Amari is usually presented with some sort of problem or adventure or something like that. And remember, this set of the Amari books was written for 3 to 5 year olds. But within the book, she has something that's happening. It's set in Atlanta, so there are different pieces of Atlanta that the kids will find and recognize in the books. So that's a piece that we've really liked because it helps connect the kids and the parents to the book. Slide, Lauren. Okay, so these are some vocabulary examples. So, and you can find more of these. There are 2 lists that you should have in your somewhere in this. I don't know where they are. I don't know where they're going to be in your resources. But these are examples. So using tier 1 versus tier 2 language. And what you're trying to do again is build children's language bank, right? So instead of using, the children were in a group, you could use the word crowd instead, because that's a less common word, and then what you would do when you're reading, when a parent is reading, is that forces them to define that word and to have more interaction with the child. So you can see these examples. There are some fairly lengthy lists. Here they are, that you can see. Tier 1 words here are on the left, and then there's tier 2 words on the right. And then I think they're going to put these out for you so that you can kind of have an idea of where you want to go as you're putting your book together. Next slide.
Awesome. So thank you so much for sharing, Lisa. And
Thank you, Lisa.
that information is so
awesome.
helpful, especially around vocabulary and providing really specific examples. One question building off of the information that you've shared that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, and that we've heard a lot from our community, is what are some things to consider when writing a book that resonates with children and supports their caregivers specifically in teaching early literacy?
I think you need to consider just the interest level. It's really hard to pinpoint this. Like, I'm sure every author would like to know how to do this exactly and what the secret sauce is, because then everybody would be like having the best children's books ever that everybody buys all the time. But I think you need to be able to have some of these tier 2 words and a storyline that is that has a little bit of interest and that you can talk about other things off of. So some of the books that we look at are like the Karen Katz series, which they have themes. And so the theme, you know, you can talk about maybe there's a lot of books around like grandparent relationships, which are great because a lot of the kids, at least that we reach, that is, they have more relationships with their grandparents sometimes than their parents. And so we talk about that. We talk about there's gardening themes, and you can do a million different activities. So I think as you're putting your book together, think what are the other things that a parent or somebody reading the book, a caregiver would be talking about while they're reading this book? What are the themes that they can pull out? And then what are activities you could do around the book too, because that's really your part of being able to interact with the book more. Is if it's a book about urban farming, you know, you can go to a field trip at urban farm places in your city. You can go, you know, you can do the little plant a seed in a Dixie cup project, right? That we've all done. So you can do those things. So I think as you're putting the book together, you obviously don't need to serve up all of those activities like as part of the book, but you need to, I think, have those in mind as to what are some other ways that adults could engage with this book, and what else could they talk about around the book.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa. This is super helpful. And I know you'll be sticking around for some Q&A following our next expert. So we'll get to hear a little bit more from your wealth of expertise and also working with the Mayor Summer Reading Club program on this. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. So next we will be joined by Dr. Patricia A. Edwards. She is a member of the Reading Hall of Fame and the NCRLL, which is the National Conference on Research in Language and Literacy. She's currently a professor of language and literacy at the Department of Teacher Education at Michigan State University. And additionally, other engagements that she's been involved with include being the president of the American Education and Research Association Family School, Community Partnerships and Special Interest Group. And she served as member of the board of directors from 1998 to 2001 of the International Literacy Association, and as president from 2010 to 2011. So we're super excited to be joined by Patricia, Dr. Edwards, and I'll hand it over to you. Hi, Dr. Edwards.
Hi, Dr. Edwards. Welcome.
Listen, hello, everyone. I'm in the locker room at the Lansing Country Club.
Well, we are so glad that you joined us still. Do you want to come up and share with us a little?
Yes. First of all, I guess you have the story telling slide up.
Yes.
The thing about, and first of all, hi Lisa, I'm a Georgia girl. I'm from Albany, Georgia.
Connections already happening today on the webinar.
Well, when you say Albany, whenever you say Albany, people know that that's New York. But when you're from Georgia, you say Albany.
Fantastic. All right, well, kick it off.
Well, the story elements of plot, character, theme, style, and tone are extremely important in a story. I guess the next slide is, I did a little digging this morning when I was looking at plot. The plots of early childhood books tend to be simple and fast-paced. And the thing about the term plot, it's a literary term used to describe the events that make up a story or the main part of a story. And these events relate to each other in a pattern or sequence. The structure of a story, of the organization of events in the plot of the story. Stories must have a plot or events that take place. To me, sometimes when I'm reading a children's book, I'm thinking about a movie, like what's gonna happen next, what's gonna happen next. So when it comes to the characters, another essential story element is the character. Character can be defined as any person, animal, figure represented in the work. And there are many types of characters. I find that children really like animals and they like little giggly, funny things. And so if the character is funny, something that they can identify with, nice big colors, they like things like that. The choices of words and actions really sort of make the child excited. You can tell when a child is excited about a book the way they're excited about a toy, because they're going to laugh, they're going to turn it upside down, they're going to look at it to see if it's fun, like what is this thing, which leads to the theme. Well, you know, of course, characters in a book's for children 0 to 3 are simple. The characters tend to be identified by clearly outlined traits, and character motivation is usually singular. When it comes to the theme, a sharply focused, simple theme clearly dominates the book. If the book is about going to bed, you will have all the items about going to bed. A lot of these books sort of teach lessons, and so it's like one thing to the next thing. You have to put on your nightgown. You know, so it's always something that a child is going to sort of get from the book. It's the underlying message. In other words, what critical belief about the life of the author trying to convey. You know, so it's something about you because you're writing the book for someone else. And I would always say you need to think like a child. I always tell parents when I'm working with them that if they have a child who is a baby, they have to think like a baby. Babies think in certain ways. And so whatever level the child is, that's where the book should be, and the child should be enjoying the book from that perspective. When it comes to style, often plays with words and use different kinds of imagery, particularly visual and auditory onomatopoeia. So it's that kind of way of looking. It's like the word choice, the sentence structure, the figurative language, the sentence arrangement. Like, you know, sometimes you can read books and the words are dancing on the page, so which really draws the child's attention to establish the mood, the images, or the meaning in the text. Contains reframes and repetitive patterns. Children really like brown bear, brown bear. My sister taught kindergarten for 30 years, and every time she would read that book, the kids would dance. For whatever reason, they would get up and they would dance because it had that beat to it. And I was talking to Lauren the other day, and I was saying to her, what's this song that Dre put out? And everybody, whether you're old, young, in between, everybody was doing the Dre song, whatever that is. I haven't caught up with Dre, but I know everybody was sort of listening to that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Oh, I forgot tone. The tone of the book is extremely important. It's the author expresses his or her attitude in his or her writing. The tone can change very quickly throughout the story. You can have, I would say for children, it needs to be funny, rather than drama, you know. And the tone refers to the author's use of words and the writing style and their attitude towards the topic, about how the author feels about the subject. One person, her name is B. Cullinan. She used to be a professor at New York University. And B. Cullinan says when you open up a book, you want to walk into the book. So I would say, as you are writing this book for children, you know how children have their favorite books. You want your book to be that child's favorite book where they really like opening up that book because they know they're going to have a fun experience with it. Okay, so the next slide, what does good look, I just said good look like? Is it a good book look like? I guess labeling. Labels enhance the narrative. Children like to identify words, and that's when kids start asking, even at a young age, what is that C word? What is that G word? And they like to know those labels. And at first, when they're looking at the book, they're looking to see the pictures and how things are labeled. The next big feature is rhyming. Children really love the rhyming. because it really sort of perks up their ears. And of course, repetition is extremely, and that's how they learn things. And by the way, I always tell parents, when you read a book and a child is sort of paying attention to this book, they know when you skip a word. So when you skip a word, you better explain, because you're in deep trouble, because they want to know, do you have your glasses on? What happened to you? Why are you skipping that word? The structure of the book is extremely important. Organization is everything. You want to ensure that you have a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. And I know sometimes when, you know, I teach elementary reading methods, and one of the things that we teach students how to do is have students retell the story to test their comprehension. So you want to have a clear beginning where kids will know how the story started, what was happening in the middle, and how did that story end. And that's a good practice test for them. And of course, questions. You want to incorporate questions to increase interaction between children 0 to 3 and their caregivers. And you don't want to tell, you want to show, you want to don't tell. Because sometimes when you tell, kids might not have a clear understanding, but if you show them, you utilize rhythm as a language tool, and then you want to take time to revise your book. One of the things I would suggest is that you practice with a 0 to 3-year-old to see what their reactions are. Because you can tell if they are giggling, if they are wiggling, if they are doing whatever, then you know whatever responses they can give you, you can tell whether those are good responses or moderate responses or really exciting responses.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Dr. Edwards. That information is just so packed with insights that that all these authors will definitely take into account when writing their manuscripts. And I would also encourage folks who will be sending this slide deck out following the presentation, but this slide serves as a great checklist as you are revising your manuscript, really asking, have I used labeling? Have I used rhyme? Is there repetition? Is there a clear beginning, middle, and end to my story? Are there questions that prompt interaction between caregivers and children and that prompted the types of interactions that Jen spoke to earlier in the webinar? Are using showing, not telling? And have you actually taken this book and had the chance to test it with folks who are 0 to 3 and their caregivers, maybe asking a friend or someone in your family to read that book and actually observing what are the interactions that are taking place and how can I build upon that? And Dr. Edwards, one question that I have for you, building off the information you've shared, would be what's a really great example of a book for children 0 to 3 that supports caregiver engagement? I know that you mentioned in our previous conversations that Where's Spot is a favorite of yours. Would love for you to expand on that example.
Well, I find that Where's Spot gives children an opportunity to talk, because I would call that a right there question book. In other words, where is he? And that gives kids a chance to point to where Spot is. The parents can check to see if the kid is connecting with what they see on the page. So I would say where Spot is a right there question. One of my colleagues had created what she called the question answer relationship. So there's like the right there questions, they're like on my own, that's a higher level. But I think for you, those of you who are writing the book from birth to 3, I would say right there questions. Like if a parent asks a question, is the question right there on the page? Because you would notice that kids look up at you to see if they got it right. And that's a time for parents to praise the child, like, yes, you got it. And so then you can hear that little giggle.
Could you give 1 or 2 other examples of what right there questions might be in addition to like Where's Spot?
Well, you can use any of the Dr. Seuss books, because those books also give you the invitation to there, or Make Way for Duckling. Any of those books where you're following the storyline and you're asking specific questions and the child can identify it after you read the sentence. That was what I would call a right there book.
Great. Thank you.
There, Seen Theirs, Good Night Moon, all of those. Even though Goodnight Moon is basically a picture book, it is you can still do the right there kinds of questions with that book.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Edwards. And I know you'll also be sticking around for some Q&A that will be coming up. So really, really excited to learn more from you. And thank you for sharing so much and putting it in the context of storytelling as well. And for joining us on this busy day. And now we're going to dive into answering questions. So these are questions that have been submitted to us on the platform in your RSVP forms. We've taken a couple passes through and found some that we've heard come up again and again, and we're excited to have both Dr. Edwards as well as Lisa Dwyer here to speak to some of those, as well as our Open IDEO team. So the first is, what makes a book have an instant classic factor and stand the test of time for children and caregivers? I would love, Lisa, to hear your thoughts initially, and then Dr. Edwards, I'll hand it over to you to build.
All right. I think I'm on mute though.
Oh no, we can hear you.
Oh, you can?
Now
Okay.
tell me the question again. I didn't get the question.
Yeah, it's what makes a book have an instant classic factor and stand the test of time for children and caregivers. So like A Goodnight Moon, for instance, that is seen as a classic in the early childhood space.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so Lisa would love to hear from you first, and then I'll hand it over to Dr. Edwards to build on anything that, that you'd like to expand on.
Well, I think goes a little bit to what Dr. Edwards was talking about, like with Goodnight Moon, specifically with Goodnight Moon. It's it kind of leaves a little bit to the imagination, even though it is basically like a picture book, but you don't necessarily have in your mind what the character specifically looks like. So I think kids can it's easy for people to imagine themselves in that position. And it's a common everyday thing that happens, right? Like you go to sleep and you put things certain places. And so there's also, Dr. Edwards talked about this, there's a sequence of events that's a common sequence of events. And I think those things really help make things become a classic, because it's a simplified story that really any child or caregiver could see themselves in.
Thank you so much for that. And I love this emphasis of what are themes that are universally relatable and how to dive into that singular theme. Dr. Edwards, is there anything that you would add in this idea of what makes?
I guess I have to reinforce what she just said, because in other words, you know, when you have something that everyone can identify with, no matter what their race or culture is, that to me moves a book into a classic. It's like, I can see myself, even though the characters might look different from me, but I can have some empathy for those characters. And so as a result, I can relate to it. And so to me, that makes, you know, there are some days like right now at this luncheon that I'm attending, it's on women's health. And we have 4 doctors here. One works at the major hospital, one of the major hospitals in town. So we have people looking at health issues from a variety of perspectives. And with this being Women's Health Month, you know, Women's Month, everybody is here, and we have all different races of people. So I would say when you're writing a book, write it with what every or most babies from 0 to 3. And I think when you do that, you become more inclusive than exclusive.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate both your perspectives. And we absolutely agree, making it inclusive for everyone. And in addition to that, you know, a lot of the focus of this being just representing the lived experience of families and children in urban places is also a really key area as well. So yeah, that's great.
And then next
well, you know what?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, in one of the conversations I had with Lauren, I said, the thing is, I know the book is going to be specific for Philadelphia, but no matter where you live in the country, I always tell people we have 50 states in this country, and whether you live in Georgia, where I grew up, I've lived in 6 different states, that it's important that no matter where a person lives, even if you don't live in that particular town, you relate to it, and you might want to get the feeling that I want to come to it. It's like a tourism bureau. You are advertising. Why would a person want to come to Philadelphia? What would they see? You know, there are multiple parts, and so I think that's kind of my perspective on that.
Absolutely, really appreciate that. And I think we'll open it up a little bit more in 2 seconds, but just a final little moment is, I think as we've mentioned before, we're not exactly looking just for a Philadelphia book. We're looking for something that is applicable kind of across kind of urban U.S. experience. So, you know, as we've mentioned to everyone on the webinar, and you probably already know, but just to reiterate, we're not looking for Philly cheesesteaks necessarily, and the Phillies playing baseball, but you know, thinking about how can this be relatable and represent, you know, sometimes underrepresented areas and communities. Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing that from everyone.
And a couple of examples that we've mentioned previously there's a lot of narratives that talk about people going to their house and people driving there in their car. And so I think when we talk about what an experience in a city might be like, what would it be like to include a narrative in which folks are using public transportation, or in which you live in a row house instead of a standalone home, or going to the laundromat as a consistent, relatable touch point. So those are some examples that might help ground more in this universal idea of a universal experience for a child that's 0 to 3, but also speaking specifically to something that resonates with folks in cities.
You know what pops up to me? Remember, there was a book called City Mouse, Country Mouse. I can see a person doing a dichotomy, because sometimes people look at farming families, city families. You know, it can be that. I love that book, City Mouse, Country Mouse.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah. We love that. We'll write that as a reference into the chat for everyone.
Because, you know, sometimes people have very stereotypical attitudes about the city, and they've never been to the city. And there's a lot of course, in Philadelphia, there's a lot there that people can see. And it's almost like, you know, you want to image something. Like, people have generalizations about people that live in apartment buildings that might be bigger than their town. You know, because there are apartment buildings that might have over 10,000 people, and some towns in America are less than 1,000 people.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic.
Yeah,
well, I think
another question that we have that we'd love to hear your thoughts, Dr. Edwards, are, given how developmentally different an infant is from a toddler, what would a book that resonates with both look like? So how could folks that are trying to write for this audience of birth to 3 think about sculpting their narrative, knowing that a newborn has a different brain development and different literacy or vocabulary engagement abilities than someone that's 3?
Well, you know what? The way I would answer that is this. Children develop very differently. You know, it depends on the child. I mean, some children might be a particular chronological age, but their language background is so developed. I would say that it's kind of hard for me to say a baby does this. I mean, there are the stages of language development. Children are babbling, and I think a lot has to do with what kinds of things parents are doing for their children. And I don't know all the research on before a child is born, but people are saying that when mothers sing to children, read to them, these kids, I've not done a statistical study on it, these kids come out better language developed. But what I would say is that children develop at their own pace, that it's kind of hard for me to say a baby does this. Like, I can send you, Lauren, a list of language development, the stages of language development, but that doesn't fit every child. You know, it's almost like when you go to the doctor and they said at 2, you're going to be this height, or at 3, you're going to have this many teeth. That's kind of hard, and that drives parents crazy, because when their kid is not at that stage, they're freaking out. And I always use the book Leo, the Late Bloomer. Leo did not bloom until Leo got ready to bloom. But if you marinate kids in the literature and they come to school soaking and dripping with print, they're going to learn to read. Unless you study the person, it's kind of hard to say immediately, I learned to read at this particular time. But I think just being immersed in language and talking and singing, all of those things develop children into readers and then later writers, or readers and writers at the same time.
Great. Thank you. And I also think that in terms of what's a grounding resource for folks to refer back to, that also building on the information that Lisa shared earlier around these tier 1 and tier 2 vocabulary as being kind of a grounding place to start to think about how to map language and your narrative to be supportive of folks from that birth to age 3.
Absolutely.
And so now we're going to move on to some more process Q&As that we can answer on the Open IDEO team that we've heard a lot from the community. So the first is, can you give an example of a type of book that wouldn't meet the challenge criteria? And you've heard a lot, both from our team and from folks at William Penn about this, but it would be really, I think that something that wouldn't meet the challenge criteria, or that would be almost success, but not necessarily success, would be a book that is a really compelling story alone. I think that's the nuance to that we're really looking for, is a book that models caregiver and child interaction, and would not only be a book for the children 0 to 3, but also be a really amazing book for a caregiver, and that would provide how-to tips, but in a narrative form. So isn't explicitly a how-to guide on literacy and teaching early literacy to children 0 to 3, but models that through a story and a narrative. So an example of a book that wouldn't meet the challenge criteria would be a book that's just an awesome story. I think what we're really looking for is that caregiver-child interaction modeled piece, and just want to emphasize that. Another question that we've had come through is, do authors still hold the rights to the non-winning manuscripts? And the answer is yes. So the only manuscript that we'll move forward with announcing one winner in late June, and that winning idea will go to publication with our publishing partner, and that will have various copies, thousands of copies distributed to families across Philadelphia, with the potential for distribution beyond as well. But anything beyond that winning author, all those folks do have access to the rights for those manuscripts. And the last question is, how do you define caregiver for this challenge? And I can start on this, and Matt, you can feel free to build. But for caregiver, and we did a lot of research around what do caregiver-child interactions and relationships look like. The one model that we see a lot in narratives is the parent and the child. So the caregiver in that case is the parent. We've also talked to a lot of folks who said, in my family, my grandmother is the primary caregiver, or there's a community leader that really serves as the caregiver for my child when they're at when they're engaging in the community, for instance. So I think there's a lot of other definitions of caregiver beyond the standard parent-child relationship that we would be really, really excited to see exhibited in those narratives. Do you have anything to build on that? Okay. Great. And now yes.
Lauren, I'm gonna have to go and eat my lunch because they were serving at around when I was coming up here. So I wish everyone good luck.
Yeah.
We so appreciate you joining. Yeah, and
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Big round of applause to Dr. Edwards for joining us. And we just have 2 minutes, so we'll share our looking ahead here.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Great.
So for looking ahead, and Itika, if you want to give a 1 to 2 sentence overview of the resources and how folks can think about using them in our final minutes.
Okay guys, so here's everything that you need to get your manuscript up to speed. The first section about early childhood research will help you understand everything about how kids learn and their whole process of development and language development in particular. The second section about book writing will actually be a great nudge for you to build the caregivers into the ecosystem and how to help the caregivers and aid them into writing the manuscript the right way, so that when they read it, it becomes a really interesting way for helping the child develop better. To make sure that the context is urban American and more related to Philadelphia and how your story can be around it. The urban context has a lot of references for you to understand, even if you're not from the city or that region, to understand what the story could be about. So the theme can come out of here. And of course, any other issues that you have about the challenge, the how-to guide is there to help you support with that. Other than that, the email is for you guys to write into. And of course, I'm there on the challenge for you to just ping, just put your drafts out there, submit them, and then there's ample time to refine them through the next 2 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Utika. And as we're sharing in the chat, you can submit more than one manuscript. You can submit as many manuscripts as you'd like to us as well. So as we've shared, this book has 2 audiences: children that are ages 0 to 3, and then also caregivers who are learning ways to develop their child's early literacy skills. So please keep that in mind. The open submission deadline is April 12th at 5:00 p.m. Pacific time. Please mark this on your calendars. We will be sending a final reminder, but other than that, you're responsible for getting your submission in, ideally before that deadline, so you can receive feedback and continue to revise it. And lastly, we'll hand it over to Jen to just revisit our challenge goal around what types of manuscripts we're really excited to see before signing off. Jen, I think you may be muted.
As Jen's pulling up, one quick.
I got it.
Oh, I got it. Cool. Go ahead, Jen.
So again, and we've emphasized this about 1 million times over the past hour, we just really want to make sure that this manuscript models early literacy practices. And it doesn't have to be sitting down and reading a book. It can be singing, talking, asking questions, but anything that is somehow modeling or showing through this compelling, beautiful story, positive parent-child or parent-caregiver interaction.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you, Jen. So one final note. So reminder, what's the date? April 12th, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you have all your manuscripts up there. And we've gotten a lot of questions in the chat box that actually are answered on our brief page. So we put the link to the brief. Really, really, we strongly recommend, if you read one thing, read all the evaluation criteria and check out all the links that are on there, because we have frequently asked questions there. We have resources to help you, and to know if your manuscript really aligns or not. Reading that evaluation criteria and knowing it by heart is the most important guidance that we can give you. So most everything is answered there. You can always ask us questions at ecbook@ideo.com. One other final plug is that we are hiring a number of contract roles for the over the next month. You can't also be submitting to the challenge, so you can't be an author and also be eligible for this. But if you know any fantastic, really experienced early childhood editors or illustrators that have experience, have done books before, we're hiring for those positions. So I'm going to send the link to those, and you can share them with your networks. Or if you fit the description and aren't submitting to the challenge, then you can apply as well. And we can't wait to see all of your amazing manuscripts and get them up there soon, so that we can start to give you feedback and connect with you.
Amazing. Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you especially to Jen from the William Penn Foundation for providing her insights. Also to Lisa Dwyer for sharing about her work at GEEARS, and then more information about the early childhood space, specifically the Tier 1 and Tier 2 vocabulary. Thank you so much for that. Also, shout out to Dr. Edwards, who's no longer on the line, for sharing a lot of expertise around storytelling, more specifically in crafting that narrative. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar following our session today, so you'll have access to it, and we will also be sending out the deck with all the resources included. So thank you again. Please email us at ecbook@ideo.com if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we can't wait to see you on the platform. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see you.
Thank you.